And the next one is structures forming the nasal cavity. So what are the structures can be formed the nasal cavity? First one is roof. So roof can be formed by the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. So this is the cribriform plate of ethmoid bones, means there is a, it can be formed by the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. So the structures will be forming the nasal cavity. First one is roof. So in this roof it can be formed by the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. So cribriform plate of ethmoid bone means there is a form of the frontal bone. So it is a frontal bone. So the frontal bone, and it can, there is a cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. It is a part of the frontal bone, and it helps in the formation of the roof of the nasal cavity. And the next one is sphenoid bone, and sphenoid bone, it can be used, it can be helps in the formation of the lateral and the roof of the nasal cavity. And the next one is frontal and the nasal bones can also help in the roof can be making the roof of the nasal cavity. So the structures can be forming the nasal cavity. It includes the roof. So roof, it can be formed by the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. So cribriform plate of ethmoid bone, it is a part of the frontal bone. So it also forms the roof of the nasal cavity. And the sphenoid bone, and it can be forms the lateral side of the nasal cavity, and the roof of the nasal cavity can be formed by the sphenoid bone. And the next one is frontal and nasal bones can also helps in the making the roof of the nasal cavity. And the next one is floor. So in this floor, it can be formed by the roof of the mouth, consists of hard palate. So hard palate means there is a 2 by 3rd of the hard palate can be made the floor of the nasal cavity, and the soft palate behind. So behind of this hard palate, the soft palate can be situated. So the main function of this soft palate in the respiration and swallowing, there is a help in the speaking. So it is a floor can be formed by the roof of the mouth, and the consist of hard palate and the soft palate. So hard palate can be 2 by 3rd of the floor can be formed by the hard palate. So next one is soft palate. The soft palate can be placed behind the hard palate. So the main function of this soft palate for the swallowing and the respiration and the for speaking. And next one is medial wall. So medial wall can be formed by the nasal septum. So nasal septum, it can be formed by the medial wall. So next one is lateral wall. Medial wall can be formed by the nasal septum. And next one is lateral wall. Lateral wall can be formed by the hyaline cartilage of the maxilla. So hyaline cartilage, it can be responsible for the respiratory tree. So the nose and the respiratory system organs can be supported by this hyaline cartilage. So from the maxilla, there is a lower jaw, and there is a formed by the hyaline cartilage maxilla. So from the lower jaw, the hyaline cartilage can be existed, and from this hyaline cartilage, the lateral wall can be formed. So the lateral wall of the nasal cavity can be formed by the hyaline cartilage of the maxilla. So hyaline cartilage can be responsible for to support the respiratory tree. So to support the respiratory organs, it can be done by the hyaline cartilage. And the next one is ethmoid and the interior concave. So interior concave means it can be helps for the humidifying the air. So while inhaling the air it is become warm. So by enter into the body it is become moisture. So moisture and the humidifier. So by this inferior concave, the humidifying the main function of this inferior concave, humidifying the air. And next one is posterior wall. In this posterior wall, there is a formed by posterior wall of the pharynx. So there is a posterior wall can be formed by the posterior wall of the pharynx. Next one is blood supply. And blood supply, there is a arterial supply and it is by anterior and the posterior ethmoid artery. So there is a posterior and the anteriorly, the arterial blood supply can be done by the ethmoid artery. So ethmoid artery, it is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. So from the eyes there is a one branch and it is called as ethmoid artery. Ethmoid artery, it is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. So and the next one is Spinopalatin artery. Spinopalatin artery, it is a branch of the facial. It is a branch of the in this blood supply. First one is arterial supply. So arterial supply, it is by anterior and the posterior ethmoid artery. So anteriorly and posteriorly the blood supply can be done by the ethmoid artery to the nasal cavity. Ethmoid artery, it is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. So from this ethmoid artery, anteriorly and the posteriorly the blood supply to the nasal cavity can be done by the ethmoid artery. Next one is Spinopalatin artery. It is a branch of the facial artery. So it is also supplies the blood to the nasal cavity. And the next one is venous drainage. In this venous drainage, the facial vein and the spinopalatin vein. There is a facial vein can be involved in the venous drainage and the spinopalatin vein can be involved in the venous drainage. Next one is nerve supply. And anterior part is anterior ethmoid nerve and the posterior part is by the pterygopalatin ganglion. So the nerve supply can be anterior part of the nasal cavity to the nerve supply can be done by the anterior ethmoid nerve. So anterior part of the nasal cavity can be done by the anterior ethmoid nerve and the posterior part of the nasal cavity, the nerve supply can be done by the posterior part of the ethmoid nerve and the posterior part by the pterygopalatin ganglion. So in this pterygopalatin ganglion, there is a main function of this ganglion. The nerve supply to the nasal cavity from the anterior part of the nasal cavity can be supplied by the ethmoid nerve and the posterior part of the nerve supply to the nasal cavity can be done by the pterygopalatin ganglion. So pterygopalatin ganglion means it is a facial nerve and it consists of olfactory bulb. So by this olfactory bulb, it is a consist of olfactory foramina. Foramina means it is nothing but opening. So by this foramina, the olfactory nerves can be passed through the olfactory foramina. So it is a facial nerve. So the posterior part of the nasal cavity can be done by the posterior part of the nasal cavity. The nerve supply can be done by the pterygopalatin ganglion. So it is a nerve supply to the nasal cavity. So anterior part of the nasal cavity can be done by the ethmoid nerve and the posterior part of the nasal cavity, the nerve supply can be done by the pterygopalatin ganglion. So in this pterygopalatin ganglion, it is a facial nerve and it is a part of the facial nerve. And the next one is functions of nose. The functions of nose, it includes the filtering and clearing of airway, and the next one is warming, and the next one humidification and the smell. So in this first one is filtering and clearing of airway. So in this filtering and clearing of airway, so the nose consists of hair. So by this hair we can filter the air. So by inhaling the hair can be filters the foreign materials, or the dust can be inhaled by the nose. So there is a filtering and clearing of airway. So filtering can be done by the hair can be present in the nose, and the hair can be helps in the filtering and clearing the air. So after inhaling the air, the hair can be helps to for the filtering the air. Next one is warming. So after the air has inhaled through the nose, and the air become warm, and after enter into the body, and the air can be moisture. So there is a filtering and clearing of airway, and next one is warming. So by inhaling the air through the nose, it is become warm, and after the entering into the body, it is become moisture. And next one is humidification. So after entering into the body, it is become warm, and it can be saturated with the water. So it is become water vapor. So it is called as humidification. Humidification means there is a after inhaling the air, it is become warm, and after inhaling the air, it is become moisture, and it can be saturated with the water, and it can be expelled as a water vapor. So it is called as humidification. And the next one is smell. So the main function of the nose is smell. So it can be helps in the smell. So there is a olfactory nerves can be send the impulses to the brain. So because of these impulses, and there is a sensation of the smell of receive can be received by the olfactory nerves. So olfactory nerves can be send the impulses to the brain, and because of these impulses we can get the sensation of smell we can receive. So it is a smell. And there is a functions of nose includes the filtering and clearing of airway, and the warming, and the humidification, and the smell. So it is the functions of nose. So by this we can complete the nose and the nasal cavity. Okay, thank you.